2024 wasn't a year for middle ground, just massive hits or crushing flops. Some movies were doomed before they even hit theaters. Borderlands, The Crow, Madam Web, and Craven were disasters everyone saw coming. But there were some flops no one expected. It's easy now to say, oh, I knew Joker 2 would flop. No, you didn't. Warner's kept the disaster well hidden, letting us all stay delusional almost to the bitter end. And this one hurt. Warner's got greedy. After Joker smashed expectations in 2019, a $70 million budget, a $1 billion box office, and even an 8.4 on IMDb, they couldn't resist. Never mind that Todd Phillips always said it was a one-off. They went all in on a sequel, threw in Lady Gaga, and made it a freaking musical. At the start of 2024, people were predicting this sequel might do as well, or even better, than the original. Projections called for a $115 to $145 million opening, and most people figured it would at least clear $700 to $800 million. But by the time it hit theaters, the reception was brutal. A D from CinemaScore, critics tearing it apart, and people walking out disappointed. It opened lower than Morbius, and its second weekend saw a drop worse than Halloween Ends, a movie that at least had the excuse of being a dual release. Joker 2 became one of the most fascinating and unexpected bombs in recent memory. Of all the flops this year, Furiosa might be the most disappointing. This was the prequel to Mad Max Fury Road, one of the most loved action films of the century. And George Miller brought his A-game again. The action was insane, the reviews were solid, and everything seemed set up for success. But somehow, it tanked. The movie cost $170 million to make, and it barely scraped that back. Fury Road didn't exactly blow the box office apart either, making $380 million off $150 million, but at least it wasn't a flop. With a smaller budget, maybe $100 million, Furiosa might have avoided disaster, but no, they went all in. What stings the most is what we've probably lost because of it. The action scenes in Furiosa were leagues ahead of anything else this year. George Miller hasn't lost his touch. But with this flop, Mad Max The Wasteland is likely dead in the water. And that's the saddest part. This movie deserved a bigger audience, but it just couldn't pull it off. This was Warner's third massive disaster of the year, and it caught everyone off guard. People thought War of the Rohirrim would be a sleeper hit. Good word of mouth, solid legs through the holidays. But then we found out it was animated, and it was game over. Lord of the Rings is all about the live-action spectacle. New Zealand scenery, massive practical sets, handcrafted costumes. None of that translates to anime. Instead, we got this choppy, low frame rate style that looked more like a Netflix original than something worthy of Middle-earth. Fans were hoping for the kind of stunning animation you'd get from Studio Ghibli or Akira. Instead, it felt rushed and underwhelming. And the whole thing seemed like Warner's was just trying to keep their Lord of the Rings rights. I kind of wanted this to be the best of both worlds. But it wasn't. It didn't look right. It didn't feel right. And it's probably the biggest misfire the franchise has seen. The Fall Guy tried to be something different. A big-budget action movie with two likable stars and a fresh angle. It didn't rely on some massive IP, which was risky, but it still had potential. The people who did see it liked it. That's why it's so surprising it actually flopped hard at the box office. And when a movie like this tanks, studios start thinking, yeah, let's not take that kind of risk again. Well, most studios anyway. Universal, I think, will keep rolling the dice. It's what they do. Sure, they lean on juggernauts like Fast and Furious and Jurassic World, but they've also got focus features for weird indie experiments, and every now and then, they greenlight a risky project like The Fall Guy. If they were afraid of taking chances, they wouldn't be doubling down on Wicked after the catastrophe that was Cats. Transformers 1 wasn't even supposed to fail. A $75 million animated movie from a big franchise with real creative care behind it should have been a no-brainer. Instead, Paramount set it up for failure by releasing it at the worst possible time. Late September? Really? That's a dead zone for family films, stuck between summer leftovers and the holiday blockbusters. The movie's slot was already a disaster, but then The Wild Robot, another family-friendly animated film, released a week later, crushing any momentum Transformers 1 might have had. And Paramount knew the risks. They'd already moved the film once to avoid Beetlejuice. Add to that the franchise's bad box office track record, The Last Night flopped, and Rise of the Beast couldn't ride Bumblebee's goodwill. People just don't care about Transformers in theaters anymore. Nobody thought Horizon was going to bring back Westerns in a big way, but we all kind of expected it to at least be something. Instead, the first part of Kevin Costner's 4-part epic was a complete flop. 3 hours long, barely any buzz, and it only made $38.2 million worldwide on a $50 million budget. Most of that came from North America. It was supposed to kick off this whole saga, but with numbers like that, it's no wonder the second chapter's release date evaporated. Costner went all in on this project. He even left Yellowstone to make it happen and reportedly put his own money into it. You've got to respect the ambition, but committing to 4 massive films in an era where epics just don't draw at the box office anymore, that's a gamble that didn't pay off. There is one bright spot, though. 6 months after bombing in theaters, Horizon Chapter 1 hit Netflix and actually became a top 10 hit in its first week. People seem to like watching it at home, where they can pause and take breaks. Because let's be real, 3 hours is a big ask in theaters for any movie. Nobody had sky-high hopes for Argyle, but with all the hype, ads everywhere, and a star-studded cast, it wasn't unreasonable to expect it to at least do okay. Instead, it bombed. Hard. Let's get to the numbers. Argyle pulled in just $96.2 million worldwide, with reports claiming its production budget ranged from $200 to $250 million. Director Matthew Vaughn called those figures absurd, though. Argyle somehow became a streaming hit after flopping in theaters. It's proof of a strange new rule in the movie world. If a film gets a theatrical release, even a disastrous one, people are more likely to notice it when it eventually lands on streaming. The movie's massive ad campaign probably didn't hurt either. Those ads were everywhere. That's part of why the failure stung so much. Argyle had everything going for it. Big names, no real box office competition, and enough hype to at least break even. But despite all that, it crashed and burned. Streaming saved its reputation a little, but it's hard to ignore how badly this one tanked in theaters.